So in this video, let's talk about 5 mistakes that photographers make that hinders their growth. So hi everyone, this is Jiggie, a portrait and wedding photographer from the Philippines, and welcome to the channel. So before anything else, if you guys haven't subscribed to the channel and would want to learn more about off-camera flash photography or maybe just photography in general, then this channel is for you. So you might want to consider subscribing, and while you're at it, click that notification bell so that you get notified every time I upload a new video. And if you want to see some of the images that I've created, you could always find me on Instagram. It's at Jiggie Alejandrino. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go straight to mistake number 1. The first mistake is too many excuses and why they couldn't. This goes back to something that I always say, that as photographers, we are never complainers, but we are problem solvers. There is a tendency, especially for beginner photographers, to think that there will always be a reason on why they couldn't get the shot, when in rather, it should be the opposite. For them to grow, they should understand how they can get the shot, even if this is what happened. I'll give you a very good example. Maybe a photographer will tell you that, I'm sorry I couldn't get the shot because it was raining. When in reality, you could actually use the rain to create some beautiful images too. So you take what is given to you and you create something out of it. Or another reason could be, oh, I wasn't able to get the shot because there was no beautiful light. So that's why also, in order for you to grow, you need to learn how to light. It's not just about being dependent on existing ambient light. You also have to know how to use artificial light, so you'll never have to give that excuse that you weren't able to give that shot because there was no light, because you knew how to bring in your artificial light. Or maybe one of the worst excuses actually that I've ever heard is that I couldn't get a beautiful portrait because the subject was beep beep. Okay, meaning they felt that because that the images didn't turn out as good, then it's not the fault of the photographer, but rather the subject, because the subject wasn't photogenic, or let's just put it bluntly, they felt that the subject lacked the beauty. But that's why I actually have this cup right here, always with me, to remind everyone. It's called the fugly mug actually. So you see how the mug really, or how the face looks like here, right? But written in the back, I had it specially inscribed. It says here, there's no such thing as an ugly model, just a bad photographer. So again, that's one really big mistake that photographers tend to make. They give a lot of excuses on why they couldn't, rather than actually just saying, okay, this is what's given to me, let me find a solution. Okay, so mistake number 2, thinking that EXIF data matters. So every time I would post a picture online, except for some of those Facebook groups that do require EXIF data, I hardly post the EXIF data because it is very misleading. I always ask the question on why do you need the EXIF data? What type of information will you get out of it? Will you be able to understand the situation of how it was shot because of the EXIF data? So let's say, for example, I give you an f6 EXIF data of 1/200 f1.2 ISO 100. How would you know the actual strength of the light, meaning the existing ambient light? How would you know the strength of the sun? Will you know how far I was from the subject? Do you know what lens I was using? Do you know what light I was using? Do you know what kind of modifier I was using? How much wattage to my light was? My flash power? All these things, even if you have all this information, you cannot really get the exact image or even get an idea on how that image was shot if I don't give you the exact distance of the light from the subject. In other words, there is this fascination about the EXIF data, when in reality, when you really think about it, it doesn't matter. What matters more is the direction of the light, which you could see already in the image, or or the quality of the light, which again you could see in the image. You could also look at the quality of the light. You could look at the poses. You could look at the composition. Those are the things that will actually make you into a better photographer, rather than asking the EXIF data. Okay, you see that it's blurred, so that means I shot it at wide open. So knowing the shutter speed, I don't understand what good that will do, or even the ISO, to be honest. Maybe sometimes you could say that the ISO, maybe I could put in a high ISO, then I would say that it was shot at night, or you'd actually be able to see that it was shot at night. So EXIF data is very misleading, so for me personally, for beginner photographers, don't fall in love with don't fall in love with the EXIF data. Rather, try to look at the image as a whole and macro. In other words, look at the light, look at the composition, look at the posing, look at how everything puts together. You will actually learn more from that. Okay, so number 3. The third one is never being a master of your gear. There is always going to be a debate whether or not it's a photographer or the gear that makes better photographs. But what I would always say is that no matter what gear you have, so long as you know exactly what your camera or what your light can do, you can get the best possible image that you can, given what gear you have. It could be the most expensive one, or it could be the cheapest one. The most important thing is that you are the master of your gear. In other words, we have a creative vision in mind. You want to create an image. Your gear is merely your paintbrush. However, you need to know what your paintbrush is capable of doing, if it's capable of doing the shot that you want. If not, you work around it. Let's say, for example, I am shooting with a very old camera that doesn't do really high ISO. So solutions could be not to shoot at night, or number 2, bring in more light. So it's all a matter of knowing what your gear is capable of, so that you can actually shoot to hide the shortcomings of your gear. Let's say I shoot a lot with my Sony system. I shoot with a Sony a7R Mark IV, but even with that, I am familiar with the dynamic range of my camera. I know exactly how I'm supposed to be shooting, what I should be doing with my highlights, what I should be doing with my shadows. I understand what my lights can do. Therefore, it's important that I am still the master of my gear. I know exactly what it is that they can give me. So again, as a beginner photographer, it doesn't really matter what your camera is, whether it be the most expensive one or the entry-level one. The most important thing is you know exactly what your camera can do, what your lens can do, what your light can do, basically what your equipment can do. So number 4. The fourth one is when they settle for good enough. One of the worst things a photographer, or especially those that I am training, can tell me is that it's good enough. When you say it's good enough, that means that you're not striving for perfection. You're not striving to get better. You don't want to get better. When you see an image and say, oh, this is good enough, means you are settling. And the moment that you settle, that will hinder your growth as a photographer, because you will no longer explore. You will no longer try to make it better. Like if you ask me personally what I believe my best photograph is, I'll probably tell you the photograph that I take tomorrow. Because every day or every time I shoot, I try to get better. I try to see what I did wrong in some of the images and try to correct them. I will never ever settle for just good enough. I will always try to create the best possible image that I can. If the best possible image that you can might not be good enough, at least you tried your best and you're still trying, and eventually you will get into that point that your image will be fantastic. But the moment they stop and say, oh, this is good enough, then you're never going to grow as a photographer. And lastly is the fact that light is never given importance. I realized this when I would ask photographers, if you were to given an opportunity to shoot somewhere, what is the first thing that you would look at or look for? And more often than not, the answer would be a good background, a good location. It's never going to be about the light. When photography in general is really about the light. So as photographers, in order for us to get better, we need to be able to see and understand the light. We need to be able to control the light, and we need to be able to make the light work to our advantage. Because in any photograph that you're taking, if the light is beautiful, that photograph will be beautiful. That's guaranteed. So never take light for granted. And again, of course, there's so many other things after that, it's like how to control the light, how to manipulate the light, a lot of learning when it comes to photography, and that's what makes photography fun. So to recap, these are the 5 basic mistakes that photographers make that really hinders their growth. Number 1 is that they have too many excuses on why they couldn't get the shot. Number 2, that fascination about the EXIF data. Number 3 is never really being a master of your own gear. Number 4 is that it's settling for good enough. And number 5, never really giving light more importance than composition or location and things like that. So if you guys have any comments with regards to the contents of this video, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. But I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, subscribe to the channel, click that notification bell, and don't forget to like this video too. And if you guys want to see some of the images that I've created, feel free to follow me on Instagram. It's at Jiggie Alejandrino. Okay, till the next video.